All right, so good morning, everyone. We just started today's webinar, today's session. What I can see that people are joining the webinar right now, so we will, without further ado, we'll just start and kick off. So hello again, it's Tuesday, the 7th of June, and we are about to kick off our 5th webinar in the Strategic Portfolio Management series. Few logistics information in the beginning as usual. The webinar will last approximately 25 minutes. We will leave about 5 minutes towards the end of the session for your questions. Hopefully we will get some. But you are free to post your questions throughout the entire webinar. A few words of introductions. My name is Christoph. I'm one of the co-founders of Quizsurf, which is a technology and consulting house about SPM. And I'm here with Jakub. Good morning, Jakub. How are you today? I'm afraid, Jakub, we cannot hear you. At least.
Good morning, Christoph. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So Jakub is the other co-founder that you can see right now on the screen, and also the CEO at Quizsurf. So we both will take you today through agility in the context of SPM. And let me now share the presentation. I'll go full screen. Hopefully you can see that. Jakub, if you could just confirm that the presentation is visible. All right.
Yes, it is.
This is our topic for today, agility, and how to manage dynamic change and enable this continuous portfolio planning. We'll take you through it in a second, but before we start, as usual, I would like to make a few words of introductions to what SPM is. We always say that SPM is a process that covers the entire life cycle of different initiatives, whether they are new products or new services, but it is also essentially about increasing shareholder value. It is about finding the appropriate balance of various initiatives that should actually generate the new value. If the company is about to grow, to sort of increase revenues, enter new markets, those initiatives can be of various different types that you can see right now on the screen, whether it's about asset replacement or mandatory type of initiatives, or new product or services development and organic growth. In the context of agility, however, we should actually look at the SPM as a process that have multiple stages and decision gates. And since it covers the entire life cycle of a product or service, usually it starts with an idea where you have only very limited information available to make decisions about maybe significant investments, maybe significant resource pool allocation and so on. Nonetheless, this is the moment where you start. And as you move along, you gather more information, you sort of work on certain revisions, you try to decrease the overall risk of your decision making and increase your intelligence. And this is what we will elaborate during today's session. So Jakub, let me start with the first point on our agenda today, and let's talk about the importance of process standardization and transparency. So I know that you've prepared a historical survey for us today, but it is important to look at the results because it's so well connected with agility. So if you could elaborate on this, please, that would be great. And let's start here.
Okay, thank you, Christoph. Yes, I think that a critical part of this process is related to standardization, collaboration, transparency, all those soft things. We have been discussing a lot about methods, tools, decision criteria, KPIs. But all of those, let's call it soft aspects of the process, are extremely important. And in many cases, they are actually the critical factors for success. What you're able to see right now on the screen are the results of a poll we did together with Krzysztof during R&D conference, I think 2 years back. There were like 73 people participating in this poll. They were mostly R&D directors from the biggest European companies, the blue chip companies, manufacturing, mostly industrial manufacturing, high technology companies too. The results are quite interesting because we ask those guys who are dealing with strategic portfolios on a daily basis, what are the biggest challenges with business case evaluation process? Of course, the context of this question was the strategic portfolio. So how they are actually managing, making portfolio decisions. What are the biggest challenges there? And most of them had challenges with collaboration and transparency, and they marked it as the one single most important thing they are struggling with. From other factors, lack of standardized decision criteria, or lack of shared business case assumptions. Other factors, as you may see on the screen, data accessibility or lack of consistent portfolio views. So those are the factors which have been mentioned across those 73 managers were actually extremely important. And the results were very much aligned with our thinking and experience. So you may probably notice that most of those are kind of soft aspects, organizational aspects of this process, and we strongly believe that it is at heart of let's say of the process: collaboration, transparency, shared business case assumptions, standardization of decision criteria. It all also creates this kind of agile framework, agile environment for strategic portfolio management. Maybe Krzysztof, you would like to also add something here.
I think it is also not sure if you would agree, but if you look at the history of Agile, especially in the context of software development, it appears because you know, in the traditional waterfall model, you first wanted to sort of define all the potential requirements, like fix them. And after this phase was completed, teams usually started to work on those requirements and quickly realized that changes were necessary because the requirements changed. Actually, they were not anymore valid from a half year ago or a year ago. So and Agile in an essence values this collaboration in transparency much more than actually any other kind of process documentation type of thing, because it's essentially it should be about delivering the value, whether it's a new software project or your new portfolio, right? So no wonder here 49% of our respondents said that agility, maybe they said actually about the collaboration and transparency, that it is especially important or especially challenging for them when it comes to strategic portfolio planning. So this is number one. But what we can see here, the number, I'm not sure which number it is, but 37% of respondents said that lack of shared business case assumptions was also quite challenging. And we have a story to tell, actually, because it's a story of, you will find it probably surprising, of two identical projects that were started once upon a time in an organization that delivered quite different results in the context of SPM. And it's quite fascinating to see how shared macro business assumptions or how shared data pool can lead to a significant challenges and differences in the result. So Jakub, if you elaborate more on those identical projects and tell us the story, that would be great.
Yeah, just to also, let's say, recap the previous slide. So we understand that there is no agility without collaboration and transparency, basically. So they are interrelated, and sharing assumption is, of course, collaboration and also transparency. So we would be able actually to combine those challenges, the challenging factors, into exactly one thing, lack of agility. Just to add on top of what Krzysztof has said.
All right. So
okay,
let's get back to this story, a tale of identical projects.
This is actually a real story coming from our experience in Quistorp, and it shows exactly. I mean, it's like eye opener for many how actually lack of agility, lack of transparency, and lack of collaboration may affect critical decision making. So the story is about two projects which have been planned in one organization. Those projects were identical from technical point of view and market point of view. So imagine that we are doing a very similar investment in two parts of our company. And the analysis to support the decision for those investments come from two different teams. So they are somehow silos from each other. Yet the project has the same essence, the same substance. And the results are like you may see on the screen. So one team presents an IRR result of 17%, while the other shows 56%. And then this is analyzed, or this is taken by the decision makers, and they say, all right, let's go for project B. It's quite obvious that it's much better than project A. And actually, in this case, our team was responsible for preparing the portfolio analysis. And for us, it went instantly very suspicious that those projects, they should be very close to each other. I mean, there's no other way that they should not be. While the results were showing something different. So we started to dig into details, and we started to analyze assumptions. We started to try to understand why the difference is like that. And we found that because of lack of transparency and collaboration, those teams were not talking to each other. They were not sharing assumptions, sharing knowledge, while in the same time the projects were identical. And when we did the standardization, so we said, all right, let's use the same approach, same methods, same assumptions. Let's have a common approach and talk about it. We have adjusted the results. And if you make Krzysztof move, yeah, and the actual results after the standardization process. So we created this kind of, okay, let's talk about it. Let's collaborate on those. The results were slightly different, and I'm using slightly in the brackets. So it occurred that actually project A is slightly better than project B. So one of the teams who were responsible for this was overly optimistic about the future, about the path, about the price paths, about the costs, and actually it led to a distortion in the results. And decision makers who are seeing the output results, like on IRR level, they were not able to understand where does the difference come from. And in the usual process, they would basically omit this and just go for project B, while the reality was quite the opposite. And this example, which is kind of an eye-opener, comes purely from lack of transparency and this kind of experience transfer, knowledge transfer, collaboration, basically. And agility also, because of course, if you put the timeline, also timeline dimension here, those assumptions are ever changing, and you need to be also able to adapt the whole portfolio to those changes, because those let's say differences may come from both also the structure and also the time. So it's extremely important.
Do you still remember what were the main change drivers? Like what kind of assumptions were there that caused those significant like differences?
The most of the changes were coming from exactly commodity prices assumptions. So this project was kind of energy intensive, so it utilized a lot of energy components, and the way it was a long-term project. I think its life cycle was 15 years, and basically the assumptions for the prices of commodities which were the critical parts of the costs, operating costs, were the main differentiator. And again, it's not about guessing the future, as we say, but if you are not, aligned, and you are not, let's say, consistent, you create much, let's say, bigger distortion here, because you may be wrong whether the commodity prices will change this way or another. But if you are also making mistake of using different assumptions inside of your portfolio, you create a much worse problem.
And I wonder still, what triggered the CEO or whomever that was from the senior leadership that actually called you and said, hey, Jakub, we have this situation, those two projects seems to be exactly the same, but the IRR seems to be quite fundamentally different. I mean, not even seems, but it's quite fundamentally different. And why did he call?
I mean, the fun fact was that we have not been called because of this difference. So
okay.
This difference was not perceived as any problem.
Okay.
And this is another thing, that because of this lack of process we can trust, we may have those critical issues there, and we are not even aware of them. So the reason our team was working on this portfolio was not that those projects had different IRRs. Okay. It was like a collateral thing which has happened during this portfolio creation process, which we actually noticed. So the decision makers, they didn't see a problem there. Right. They were just taking those IRRs for granted. But let's say, working on the process details, let's say, resulted in this finding, but it was like a collateral thing. It was not the purpose of our work. It just came up. And then, of course, the whole thing started to be big, because they realized that they made those kind of mistakes in the past while making their decisions, and this might be a repeating problem. So it's a process problem. Yeah, but I mean, nobody had noticed that. They were just taking it for granted. Project B is better, period. IRR is better, period. And without access and without standardization of the process, without transparency behind the assumptions, it was virtually impossible to notice that. So yeah.
Right. So if B was the first one that landed on CEO desk, he would immediately approve it. If a couple of months after the A landed, then he would maybe approve it as well, because he may not remember about the B anymore, or because there was no centralized kind of place where we could look for those kind of different initiatives that were ongoing. All right. So that's quite an interesting finding here about this shared macro assumption. So let's quickly try to wrap up today's session, and let's maybe then jump to this last point of our agenda, which is about scenarios and revisioning, really. So what would be your take on that one?
I mean, it's more about a summary of this whole agility topic. So that there are several things you need to always keep in mind while thinking about strategic portfolio management. And they are very much tied and related to stress testing and revisioning. So first of all, it's always about the future. So strategic portfolio management is about trying to understand the future, trying to make the best guess decisions on some kind of future assumptions. And this is the reality you need to accept. It is always to some extent subjective, and your role is to make it as objective as possible. And to get there, you need to use different tools. You need to use shared assumptions, you need to use stress testing, you need to be agile, basically. Another thing you need to keep in mind is that there are silos in the organizations, and there is internal budget competition which is related to those silos. So breaking the silos and creating this kind of collaborative co-working environment is extremely important for the overall success, because you are looking at the whole portfolio, strategic portfolio. You are not interested in the success of one particular business unit or division. You are looking at the whole portfolio. And if you don't break the silos inside of your organization, and you are not enabling this transparency and collaboration, you will have budget competition, and you will have those kind of situations that you've mentioned on the previous slide. And agility, of course, dynamics and iterations are the core concept here. So you always need to iterate. You always need to update. You always need to be ready to adapt for changes. And for that, there are tools like stress testing, which we have been also discussing during previous webinars, that are critical and extremely important, so that you may adapt, change, check, understand uncertainty. Those are critical things. And of course, last but not least, it needs always to transfer to the portfolio view. So looking at those things on a single project level is just not enough. So you need to be able to allow those changes, this agility, also on a portfolio level, which becomes kind of a complex thing because of the amounts of data, amounts of different details. But those are the let's say, critical things, and agility is, of course, the central concept here.
So it would be about right that the traditional approach to strategic planning, that you plan today and review maybe in a year time, or in 2 years time, is not valid any longer because of the dynamics of the markets and the high uncertainty right now. And whenever you need to adapt and change and plan, you should actually be able to do it, not waiting for this traditional review cycle, right?
I think you've said the right summary here. It's just not valid. Right. Basically, you cannot rely on those kind of long update cycles, because you will lose. I mean, we are still unable to have anything close to day-to-day real-time data, because you cannot basically process and those amounts of data on a daily basis and recreate the future each day. But the frequency must be much higher than on a yearly basis, on like kind of a budgeting cycle or something.
And we can also think about a scenario when you mentioned about those identical projects. The main change driver were commodity prices. I mean, to some commodities, you may have even live updates from various different places, right? So we can think of a system that connects with that and gives you a real-time update. I mean, you don't have to look at it every day, but essentially whenever you would like to make a portfolio snapshot, you would just open it and see what are the results, right? How it impacts your portfolio today and whether you should do something about it.
Yes, of course. From technical perspectives, you may be close to real-time data and may build models and build automations which will allow you to have this, let's say, very dynamic data. But of course, from decision-making perspective, you cannot go back to your decision-making each day. But of course, data-wise, we can be close to real-time updates. Yeah. All
right. Thank you, Jakub. I think that wraps up our today's session. Before we jump to a Q&A, short introduction to us in a sense of the technology bit in the technology and consulting house. So we quite a few years ago we developed a system that is Crystal Growth, that essentially allows organizations to plan their portfolio, find the proper balance to find the kind of to manage uncertainty also, and to be agile. So if you would like to learn more about it, feel free to reach out to us, drop us an email or reach out via LinkedIn. Now, without further ado, let's jump to the Q&A. We have a couple of questions already. The first one, to improve collaboration seems to be important by R&D and other managers. Of course it is. When you start a project to improve collaboration, where do you start? How do you get most improvements in the fastest way?
I strongly believe, and this is also a message we are trying to convey throughout this whole webinar series, is that the one and most important thing in this whole, let's say, soft part of process improvement. I mean, we are not talking about quantitative criteria or some advanced models, but if we look at the organization and the soft part, transparency is the key to also, like, I mean, transparency is the key to quality and to collaboration, and it's like a door opener for many good things which may happen with the process. I will tell you another very brief story, which will also hopefully address the last question, which I am seeing on the Q&A list, how actually transparency made a difference. So I've been on a conference hearing this guy from a very big private bank from Switzerland, who was responsible for cost down activities across the whole organization. And he was basically, you know, hired to reduce the costs on individual bankers' expenses, like they were spending money on travels, accommodation, you know, expensive dinners with customers, etc. So his role was to cut those costs, and he was thinking about how to force those people, how to make them, how to create procedures to basically, you know, disallow them to spend so much. And he came up with this idea that instead of making those complex procedures and penalizing them, I will just create a dashboard in our, let's say, IT system, which would allow everyone to see everyone's spendings. So he created basically a BI showing how much you are spending and graphs and trends, and everyone would be allowed to see how much your colleagues are spending, and of course your spendings will be also visible to others. So in simple ways, in simple terms, he created a transparent environment, and without introducing any procedures, without penalizing, without running, you know, and screaming and shouting, he basically achieved his goal only by creating transparency. So people started to talk about it, people started to look at each other, talk to each other, and of course also try to be more prudent about their behavior. So create, I strongly believe that it works the same way in context of strategic portfolio management. So if you are getting your strategic portfolio data from a single initiative, so single projects, and people are working on that, and their work is not transparent by definition, they're hiding their assumptions, hiding their models, the quality will always suffer. While if you allow from day zero this transparency, that whatever I'm doing on my projects, it is seen, it is visible to the other stakeholders, because we are one team and we should be able to see each other's work, and we should be able to talk about it, we should be able to ask questions. It automatically, without any big effort, without any complex procedures, it is increasing quality, and actually it should increase the value of your portfolio. So, and of course it creates paths for collaboration. So one single answer, the most simplest one, is to enable transparency.
Thank you, Jakub. So I think we may not have a time for all the questions, but feel free again to reach out to us. Let's discuss. So the key messages from today's session is collaboration and transparency. Doing that, you will achieve agility, and you will achieve much more things that you may not even think that are possible in terms of your strategic portfolio planning. Thank you for today's session. Thank you for joining. I already now invite you for our next webinar, which will be the 6th webinar in the series, next Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. CEST. The topic will be strategic impact, and the link between strategy and execution will be quite fun, quite exciting. So I hope to see you there. Feel free to register. Well, I wish you have a great day and a very productive start to the week. Thank you, Jakub, for the session.
Thank you, Krzysztof, and thank you guys. Hear you next week.
Have a great day. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Cheers. Bye.